Hello, everyone. We're going to give it a few more minutes until other people come in. I wanted to check and see if you're seeing my PowerPoint. I don't know if you could chat me back. Hopefully you're seeing the first screen of the presentation. Okay. I take it silence means yes. So let's just give it a couple more minutes while other people come in, and then we'll get started. Okay. LHI image. Okay, so you're not seeing my screen. Okay, well, that's one of the updates, so let me see. Um, okay, so hopefully now you all are seeing the correct screen, the PowerPoint. Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry you all are muted, but if you raise your hand, I can unmute you. So we'll get started. Welcome to the bi-monthly LHI call. We are talking today about insights that we've gained from a national disaster, the COVID pandemic that took us all by surprise in 2020. I'm going to do some minor updates, and then we're gonna get down to the nitty gritty. So just bear with me. This is LHI centric updates for those of you who use this national platform. First of all, we're gonna record the call and we're gonna post it and share it so that those of you who wanna come back and review, you can do that, or if you wanna share with others. So that will be posted in the probono.net/LHI page, and we'll also put it on YouTube so you can view the call. We have a fun agenda. We're gonna do these quick updates, and then we're gonna get into the nitty gritty, which is the insights part. And I'm going to be sharing insights that we gain ourselves from doing our own analysis and ongoing conversations with the field. But then I'm also showing some preliminary data from our evaluation for last year's work with a third-party evaluator as part of our national work on the project. And so that's kind of the plan for now. Quickly on the updates, we have updated the hot dogs that's running on LHI to 11.2.19. We did some work on this last Saturday, and we're gonna complete the work on it this Saturday. We're trying to do it at times when there's a very low usage, because it's going to bring the system down and the users will get a message that the system is under maintenance. And so it won't be working during those time periods. So the 26th is the last time. The other thing is that we're gonna have a new LHI look and feel, and that's what I was sharing before. Let me see if I can pull it up for all of us to look at. The new LHI look and feel is the culmination of a project that we've been talking with all of you since last year. We finally are now doing the work. We had shown you this look and feel in monthly calls, and the idea was to streamline how the information is presented so people can just go straight and not start like lawyers. We always start with terms of use, and that's not very user centric. So we're changing that approach and presenting it this way. The other thing is that we are going to be showing who creates the interviews. So any of you that have interviews that say LawHelp Interactive, please change that. This is to be in more compliance with the ABA document assembly guideline requirements. The other thing too is that we're gonna have when the interview was last updated, and that means when was the last time the owner touched it, whether it be technical changes or just metadata updates on the system. So that at least the user would know the last time the owner looked at it. And so please make an effort to change this because we are not serving all of the interviews that are on the system. So that's that update. So let me get back to the call. And it's gonna be going live hopefully in the next code push, and we don't have a date on that, but I will let you know when that is. And so if you're planning to do any summer projects, making documentation based on the images, you may want to wait. Also, another update is that partners will be able to pull weekly reports instead of monthly reports, and that's going to be coming up soon. So I know that for a lot of you that will be helpful. The last piece is on updates is that we're going to be putting a paid forward look and feel in LHI for people who want to contribute to other users. Being able to access the system and assemble the documents. This again is gonna be probably in July. We will let you know when it's on Rebel QA if you wanna take a look at it. We did have a very good conversation with some partners that volunteered to give us feedback on placement, language, everything. So we've taken all of that feedback and put it in, and so it's going to be coded with that feedback. So it will be coming up probably in production in July, like I said, so just be on the lookout for that. So jumping to the main topic, insights from the pandemic. When the pandemic hit in February, Miranda and I had an internal conversation about how we were gonna put our energy and mental resources on working with the 44 states that we work with on online forums. And what we both concluded is that rather than us like jumping in and saying, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and this is what we're going to do, we decided, hey, let's just look at the data and start monitoring how the data is changing, but also let's start really listening. And since we have multiple channels, including our tickets that we get from end users, we have conversations with partners that are ongoing in projects that we're supporting deeply, or even just through emails and calls that we have with many of you. And then, also realizing the impact that the pandemic was having. We were seeing courts shut down. We were seeing libraries shut down. And we know who our users are. So we just decided, let's just listen and really be humble and see where the pain points are coming up with the pandemic. And so that's what we did from February to probably mid-April. And once we knew where the pain points were based on the conversations and what the users were sharing with us, we decided, okay, this is what we're gonna do in reaction to this pandemic. And so the focus became what I call closing, which is a term that actually I borrow from Laurie Garber in NJP, this concept of closing the last mile, because LHI and any other form that's a form platform, we create the documents, but the issue was that all the places where people were using the forms and all the places where people were filing the forms were quickly shutting down. And I'll show more about this. So we decided, people are really in pain trying to figure out where they can file, what do they do with the document, what comes next. So what can we as a platform, as a system do to facilitate getting people to the next thing that they need to do with that document? And so that was the focus of that. And so the other pain point was signatures. And so we created the capacity to add e-signature PDFs and did a lot of outreach in terms of A to J commissions, simplifying signatory and notary requirements because there were moratoriums imposed by governors, which was really good policy. So encouraging people to keep those post-pandemic. I don't know if that's happened or not, but hopefully some states are doing that. And then, we decided we're gonna simplify the way people can send emails through LHI because creating an e-filing system is complex and expensive and time consuming. And to close the last mile, there has to be some systemic way where an interview that serves 40 counties could potentially send an email submission to a court with attachments, as a filing. So we modify the system to do that. And then, all of this led the pandemic, the death rates, the incidence rates, um, led to a big awareness of the disparities that we have in this country about issues about race and ethnicity and language. And so what we decided to do in LHI was to actually start asking our users in our annual survey about their race, their ethnicity, and language. We already asked about income and other demographic statistics, but this was the first time because the question is, if we claim that we're closing the justice gap, and we know that the people that benefit from legal services corporation services are 70% women of color, and LHI is serving the middle class and income challenged communities, is that really who we're serving? So this was our first year really asking that question because we want to know so that we can do better. And so I'll share all of this in the call. Now, we started, like I said, we were aware that this was going to have an impact on utilization. And so we can pull the data by week. That's something that we've always been able to do. So we started pulling the data by week. And right after the executive order of March 13th, when we pulled the data for that to that weekly period, we saw the huge decline on national data. Then we also pulled the data for different states, and it became very obvious that states that had mostly brick and mortar show up to the self-help center and do the form, or big installs where their computer lab terminals where people would go for workshops and all of that, those states had a steep decline. States that were doing mostly remote work and already had built the forms in this concept that there would be remote assistance and people would not be going anywhere, had less of a drop. But the national utilization data, right, was pooled, and you can see the impact of brick and mortar library closures, people not being able to do forms from their office, did have a big impact. And that state, so if you studied the pandemic in your state for your court system or for your legal aid services, you probably were in a position where by April, governors were letting courts, some states started to reopen to phase one, and other states started to say, courts, you can do what you need to do for your important dockets. And so different states started reopening dockets. And so utilization started going on up, and it continued to go up, but it went in ebb and flows because of the phases. Many areas in the country went up to phase one, then they went to phase three, then they got shut down again. And so a lot of this reflects the ebbs and flow of the COVID rates and the death rates and what courts were doing in terms of opening or shutting down some of the dockets. So this was, very interesting for us. The type of forms were changing, once the CARES money also impacted what people were doing. When the CARES money come in, a lot of the income sustenance forms also dropped down because those monies counted as resources for food stamps, etc. And then, very sadly but truly, wills and probate, those of you who have wills and probate forms, started really going up as the death started to accrue in certain localities. And so all of this is reflected in this chart. It's more happy to share with you more, but we were noticing these patterns, and we started right in March. So we were like, okay, so this is part of our listening, trying to figure out how we can help. Now, we have the send desks where people send us questions, which are supposed to be technical assistant questions. And so we started seeing a lot of questions on e-filing, and the civil court office is closed. They're not answering the phones. How do I send this to the court? I mean, we got all kinds of messages, and we started looking at our ticket, by e-filing because we classify them. And it became quite evident that the e-filing submission process was a big problem And so we reached out to the lists, and we also reached out one-on-one to partners. And many of you gave us really great pages that your courts and your statewide website information and referral teams had created. So we started sending those through CanNotes. We don't have that many. I said that in reality, we have like 5 or 6 statewide e-filing instructions that are really easy and simple to read for end users. I think it's an area where it would be worth for everybody to put attention to, because disasters are not going to go away. And as you can see, the questions continue to escalate, and it ebbed. It reached a peak in July. But, it goes on up. So this issue of how do people e-file is something that needs attention inside your forms, in your web pages, and instructions that people print out, because it's obviously a difficult, and it reached a peak during the pandemic. It was happening before, but not to this level of degree. And so I think that this is a systemic issue, and we should have conversations about that. But if you want to give me instructions on if your state has a simple page where people can e-file, let us know. Or if you want to talk about email as an option, happy to connect with that. So the email to court agency feature was how we reacted, how we put our limited resources to closing that last mile. And so we created this capacity that, based on the interview, if the legal aid and the court or the court itself has worked out on an agreement to receive email submissions as filings, we created this capacity to do that, to show that in the form, and also to let people attach documents that are not created by LHI. And so basically this reduced instead of people entering an email, which often people mistype emails, the idea was we will let the developer, the owner, decide to put to code into the form the exact email, and then LHI would process it like this and show this option. So that was and that we rolled out by July of last year, July and August, September. We kept pushing this, we keep improving the language here, and then we put it out in Spanish too, because some courts started to receive this in domestic violence pleadings this way, to facilitate them still serving the public when they were closed. Now, in July of last year, we had an A to J Tech fellow, and she did research for us, and she was looking at the Google Analytics searches and how they were coming to LHI and which LHI pages were coming. So we started seeing that this very direct and immediate correlation between what court systems were doing and what LHI forms were doing in terms of utilization. And what we learn or we confirm is that people who are in crisis are extremely effective. They don't look and search for things that they don't know. So if a particular docket was closed, they were not going to be creating and assembling forms. Those assemblies went down. If dockets were open and were simplifying the process to submit with LHI tools, those forms grew significantly in terms of use, in terms of emails, in terms of connect, sharing activities. And an example of that are Puerto Rico and DC courts, where they benefited from some of these online form capacities. So people really just were doing what was open and where they needed help. Unfortunately, it was domestic violence, child support, and then child guardianships and things that indicated child endangerment. Those were the type of forms that went really high, and then also the wills and probates, really reflecting that people were just doing what they needed to do and not planning ahead, on divorce or anything like that. The other thing is that for the partners that did create COVID-specific pages where they surfaced the forms that they knew could be filed, where they surfaced the self-help forms that they knew people could do, whether they be housing, like we just fixed in New York, or income support and maintenance on insurance employment. LHI has more than just court-based forms. The partners that put that out to the public at large did Facebook outreach and all of that, and we're very intentional. Those partners did have more utilization than those that did not. And the other thing is that, the digital divide is super real, particularly when people who, because of income, don't have fast speed. When the library shut down, when their offices shut down, it started having an impact not only on ability to use the system and create the forms, but also print them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, we became very cognizant of that. And then the rural divide, because of broadband connectivity, affects everybody in rural areas regardless of income. And so that also became a real serious concern. And then different states have different patterns. Not every state had the big decline. Some states actually had increases during the pandemic, either because they were releasing new forms, or because they had always been remote, or because they added remote assistance to people. So it wasn't like every state had a decline, and then many states had really fast recoveries. So from the LHI evaluation, we do retain a third-party evaluator. We do an RFP, and we retain an evaluator. Last year, our evaluator was Comench, which is a consulting firm that does evaluations in the access to justice space. And we did data collection from December to April of this year, and did multiple questionnaires. Many of them were keeping consistent to prior evaluations, but this year, because COVID was such an unusual phenomenon, we added questions specific about COVID for partners, for end users, and we collected additional metrics on utilization because we wanted to understand what value did not existing forms have when a disaster like this of national proportions hit. We were, not saying, okay, everybody that's invested on online forms as a strategy, how has that strategy worked out for them and for the system? And we are, and like I said, we changed some of our questions to include race because it's something that needs to be done in technology. So some of the major highlights, right, is that the use dropped, like I showed you the image, in the second quarter, but by the fourth quarter, it had rebounded. Interviews went down for the total of the year by 1%, but the creation of documents was the highest than it ever was in the year. And I think that's because of the recovery towards the end of the year and the reopening. The other good news was that the number of documents created in proportion to assemblies, we call that the rate of conversion, and this is a raw metric, is not by user, that went up last year by almost 8%. And I'm happy to announce that continues to go up in 82%. So meaning that the people that sit down to create an interview are assembling at a higher rate than they were in 2019 or in 2020. So that's a good thing. The other thing is that in total, there were 186 templates added to like the LHI collection, which is probably around 5,400, not all of them active now. So that was good to see additional forms being created in the system, but everybody was so overwhelmed coping with their local remote transition plans that I was surprised to see that it was this many, because I know that many of you were dealing with basic technical infrastructure, basic questions about how do we receive things online. And then pleased to report that, a lot of the changes we do on the system are really geared towards improving utilization and ease of use of LHI. The request for support decline, and this is the third year in a row that it has declined, which is good because it means that the simplified instructions, the better design of LHI is leading people to have less questions about how do I do this or how do I get this. And on average last year, we resolved 271 tickets from end users or partners per month, with about a 30% decline. So that was all good. In the partner survey, we were really happy to see that many of you remain highly satisfied, very and somewhat satisfied with LHI as a platform with our training. We also learned that more of you now, a third of you are using LHI for internal casework and to increase your productivity. This is higher than in prior years, which was about 20%. And many of you agreed with the statement that LHI was critical to provide remote services during 2020. In terms of end user feedback, it increased. 96% of our users would recommend or use LHI again. They remain mostly self-help family members. 21, says self-help. This was self-help and family members. This is the same as last year. The majority of our self-helpers are these sort of folks. 21% reported not having internet at home, which is 1 out of 5, which is significant. And then 46% reported not having printing capacity at home, which is something we all should be thinking about, like Montana Legal Services has done, is in creating instructions for people who are on cell phones and tips on how they're going to print from a cell phone, because it's not a platform issue, it's a cell phone issue. But we need to be ready to support people when they get stuck with the printing question. 34% of our users are now on mobile devices, so that's the highest it's ever been. So these issues of printing become real. We are oversampling in rural areas, which is great because it means the online forms are a resource in legal deserts. And nationally, and the percentage of U.S. residents in rural areas is not 32%, it's something like 23%, maybe lower. And 88% of the people that sat down to do an interview actually created a document in that sitting. So that's very good. Some of the quotes from end users, when asked about what role did LHI play for them in the pandemic, were very moving. So I'm sharing some of these, like this one, it meant a great deal to me and my well-being. I wasn't exposed to getting COVID-19 virus and still was able to get information I was looking for. It's important because a lot of people were afraid to come in contact with people having the form makes this easy. In terms of the questions that we added on race, language, ethnicity, which we're going to keep asking year by year to make sure that we're like an equitable system and that the system is accessible to everyone. It was a good, pleasantly surprised to see that our system is embraced and used by different groups that tend to generally be underserved in technology and in legal systems. So, I'm putting the statistics here. For some groups, we do have a room for improvement because we are not at the national level. And so that's something that we're going to work with partners on, maybe thinking about how do we do outreach to some of these groups. Primary language in Spanish came up at 5%, which I probably think is related to not having equity in terms of how the forms get created in other languages, and that's a local decision whether to invest in that or not, but impacts who our users are. And in terms of income, 53% of the users were up to 40,000, and then over 80,000, 10% of the users. So we are reaching a range in LHI. We don't means test, but we are reaching a range, primarily mostly lower income, middle class, and then, over 80%, over 80,000, 10%. I'm going to stop to see if there are any questions. Okay, no questions. Now, in terms of end users, we had like 661 answers. This was the survey that we put on the site. So it was a very robust sample. Now, it was really good to see that more users are signing up to LHI because that means that they can save and they can come back. And so if they're on a cell phone and they get disconnected, they don't lose their work. So it was really good. I know that many of you have been focusing on this and asking your users to sign up before they come to start working on an interview. All of these joint efforts are paying up. And so congratulations to all of us that have been encouraging people to save if they're going to do a very long interview so that they don't lose their work, so that they can come back and edit and proofread, etc. It was really interesting that the proportion is so much higher in the hot dog interviews, hot dog faces interviews than the A to J facing interviews. I don't know the reason why, but it was something that I was not expecting. So we'll look into that. Um, Now, self-helpers accounts increased assemblies in 2020, and the advocate and court employee accounts had a decrease. And that's, closely related to the closures and also to the fact that many offices closed for 2-3 weeks when the pandemic hit. People didn't have remote setups done. Self-help centers had to move to people doing it from home. I mean, I know that it was a really traumatic period for everyone. So, and then the issue of unstable internet connections continues to come up for systems and for end users and for locations in rural areas. So we will continue to think about what we can do on our end to support people that are in those situations that they can help. Now, we asked our partners in the partner survey how COVID had changed them because we wanted to know, okay, what did this disaster do to how you think about how you provide legal services, how you provide court services, how you provide information and referral services. And, the insights there were fascinating. Like 91% of them people who answer a partner survey say that they made a partial or a complete shift to remote services. I was actually shocked that it was that high. But it's really good because if legal can move to remote, that's like a dream that some of us have been working to really normalize remote workflows because the technology is there. Many said that they will continue doing remote workflows and incorporated that after this pandemic ends, and hopefully something that always will be available for any local or national disaster. Um, some said that the pandemic helped develop easy filing protocols for litigants, like the light e-submission that we did. That is good to know that those processes are being simplified and hopefully also provided by free. And here are some of the quotes that partners gave us. And I thought, they're very realistic, right? Some people still want to have the human touch. Legal problems are scary and nerve-wracking for self-represented litigants. So the human touch was something that was lost, but your interviews can guide people. And so it's kind of a balance. Now, partners also reported that since they had the forms ready to use, or they were working on forms projects, when the pandemic hit, that ability, that internal capacity enabled them to create new relationships, which is great because when there's a disaster, we should always be working in partnerships in the nonprofit, sector. So some of them, for example, shared that they were able to create clinics for temporary restraining orders in the domestic violence front with nonprofits that they had not worked with before. Some, started increasing or adopting remote workshops for form users so that they could do the workshop with a proctor or a self-help staff person remotely and not be in the same place. Very similar to what the Sharp clinics do in California. And then for those that already had court form projects, people in the other courts in other counties started saying, hey, can we use your form? Can we share on the form? Which was really good because then that meant that that form could be leveraged for other counties and could be used to expand access somewhere else. So rather than thinking, oh, we have to have a new form, there was more conversation in the court-based projects about that. Now, we asked the users what happened to you during the pandemic. How did this COVID virus and closures impact you? And this is what they said, and many of them said it was a lot harder to access the courts, right? They didn't even know if the courts were open. They called and people didn't pick up the phone, end users were really scrambled, and we saw that in our inbox. 61% of the LHI partners actually said that they saw a decline in intakes and help requests. And I think that that was because people were so stressed out. And also, it could have been because the intake and triage methods changed, how people would connect. That disconnect led to a decline in requests for assistance, which is kind of counterintuitive. And then 48% of the end users that said that it was hard access to other hard, access legal services. So these two things may be correlated, or maybe even a reflection of each other. And 99% of them thought that the forms helped them out during the pandemic, which was really good to hear from the survey. We manage web metrics. LHI gets traffic from all over the world, but I'm just sharing the US metrics from our Google Analytics. The sites that refer to LHI, we approve. And so the top 10 sites made up 95% of our users. And our mobile users were about 9%, 8%. And they made up about 22% of the email documents. And I think that this is because of the printing and also the Microsoft Word issues. Mobile users are using email documents. And then I already shared this, that a lot of folks don't know how to print from cell or tablet. And they used to rely on friends, family, libraries, workplaces to print. And a lot of these options got blocked out. And so they put that directly on the pandemic. When everything shut down, they were left without ability to print. And the other thing is that we did see correlating in our survey education, because we asked education questions and income questions. And there was a correlation, very much like what Pure reports. People with desktop and laptops tended to have higher education and higher income. People with lower than 30,000 income and lower education ranges tended to be mostly on mobile devices. So that very much is something that we need to be cognizant with as we design tools. Now, in terms of accounts, I was really blown away by this because I did not expect this. We had 144,000 new accounts last year, and a total of almost half a billion registered users, an increase from 21%. And these, we checked and we saw that these users, the majority of them, they're active accounts. 98% of the new accounts were for self-helpers, so people that needed something done right away. 1,500 of them were for advocates and 658 for new core users. And then we had 88 new template developers, people that create the forms. So this was really incredible to me because between February and April, there were systemic closures that impacted everyone. So I was very pleased with these numbers. It's a lot of accounts per month. In terms of usage data, this comes from the system. The top 4 states, remain New York, Michigan, California, and Illinois. We had 44 active states. We had 11 states that had growth in documents generated on a per capita basis. And this was very interesting. Our evaluators actually did look at the COVID rates and decreases in document assembly per state. And it was really interesting that they did find a correlation between decreases in document creation and COVID rates and infection rates, meaning the states with high COVID rates and high death rates saw declines in their document creation, because probably those were the figures that public health officials were using to determine what was open and what was closed at the very hyper local level. So that was really interesting, something that we can think about next time there's a disaster. And depending on if the impact of a disaster is really high, people may be accessing assistance a lot less, and there may be impact on the form use that you have that is significant. So how do you overcome that? And then I shared these new partnerships. And probably the new partnerships was we saw a lot of we approved a lot of new organizations. We added a lot of new organizations to LHI so that people could sign up with their accounts linked to those organizations. So all of that, was what we were experiencing as we were managing the system. So I am going to stop here and see if people have any questions. And I can unmute you if you raise your hand or if you want to put something on the chat. And if you saw similar, if this rings true with your experience as a legal aid or court person providing services, I would love to hear if any of these rings true for you in your experience as you're analyzing or coming back to see, okay, what can we do better in 2021? Is any of this ringing true for you in your form or legal information type? Anyone want to chime in? No? Okay. I'm not going to call on anyone. Um, I don't see anything on the questions either. Okay, well, seeing that there's no comments or questions, we can call it. Hold on, I see Diana has her hand up. I'm going to unmute her. Diana, hello. Sorry, I wasn't seeing your hand.
That's okay. I don't think I have anything super insightful to say, but I am kind of struck by the issue of the ongoing digital divide. And I'm just wondering whether anyone is aware of how states are addressing that. I know in California, we've had a number of attempts to extend broadband. There have been, varying levels of success with that, particularly in our rural areas. But I didn't know if there were any other states that can report some success on that. I mean, that just seems to be something that trips us up in the end. And all of this information you've provided is so helpful. It's really encouraging in terms of, LHI's ability to make a huge difference in the middle of a pandemic. All awesome, but we do continually run into this issue of bandwidth and variable internet quality, and it just trips us up. And so I'm just wondering if anybody else has like some amazing, digital divide solution or anything they've seen be successful.
Great question. Well, we had, and I don't know if Johnny, who's also with me on the call, we had published some blog posts because there was significant increase in funding, right? For not only at the individual level where they did give subsidies, $50 a month subsidy, that is now available for people to apply so that those that are having financial barriers can get fast speed, and each state is distributing that differently. But I do hope that those promoting remote services are also doing outreach on that. But there was also infrastructure money that came in that is coming state by state. I've been eyeballing it for my Eastern Washington little town where I live, because when the school started and the teachers were logging in and out for homework, like, at 10 a.m. and like at 3 p.m., I was completely out of internet because it was, my whole town goodie, it's a public good. So I couldn't have video conferencing or anything going on at that time because I knew that the whole town would slow down because we have only one provider. I know that there's state revenues that are coming, and they were being distributed kind of equivalent to the CDBG community block grants at the state level. And I don't know if any legal aid groups are actually involved in those conversations on where those monies and where those funding for infrastructure, for laying, putting towers and all of that are coming up. But it's a big advocacy project, you know, to make sure that those towers get put in the places where there are people in need, not necessarily people who already want faster, right? Or want to go to 5G. But I'm happy to hear if anybody has been doing that advocacy, or maybe we could share in the list outreach that has been going on about the subsidy, because that's a great for a family. You know, internet, we've come to believe is a human right. You need it for job search, you need for school work for your children, you need it for civil legal aid to protect yourself, you need it for healthcare. So, you know, the outreach on the subsidy is vital for by the whole nonprofit field, not just courts and legal aids.
Thanks,
So
Claudia. That's helpful.
wondering if anybody's doing any outreach, or I mean, I would be happy to brainstorm. Is there anything we could do? Because Pro Bono Net has posted those blog posts on the policy and the funding that's coming down from the federal government. Um, you know, but what the field is doing, or should we be doing as a form community nationally? Should we be doing more? Anyone have anybody doing advocacy on this or on the broadband issues? Lisa, can I unmute you? I saw that you said emergency broadband. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. What's happening in Louisiana? Trying to find you so I can unmute you. Okay, I unmuted you, but I think that you're self-muted. And Lori too. I'm gonna unmute you because I said that you wanted to raise your hand. I unmuted you, Lori.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and I don't have any solutions, unfortunately, on the broadband issue. You know, I think we've been trying to just push out and publicize the availability of the funding. But yeah, I mean, that remains a huge barrier, and not just in rural areas, but in urban areas.
Yeah.
Where it's a cost issue. And yeah, and it's a basic utility at this point, so it's necessary for daily life, as you said. I just wanted to say thanks for all the statistics and information. I think it's really interesting and helpful for us to be able to compare, you know, locally what things look like. I'm glad you're asking the demographic questions and the education question, especially. And I guess, you know, the thing that just keeps hitting me over the head is how much more mobile friendly we need to be, especially to be adequately serving the low income target populations. You know, I was really struck, you know, the IRS just put out this new portal to get your childcare credit monthly, and you have to sign up for it if you haven't been filing tax returns regularly. So this is going to be a low income population that doesn't normally have to file tax returns. And the portal doesn't work on mobile, right? You know, it's just this really basic flaw, and you know, I just think it's a cautionary tale and a big reminder to all of us that our systems need to be more accessible mobile. So it's good to have the data about what usage is looking like now.
Yeah, and we are really taking that seriously, you know, in terms of increasing the rate of assembly for mobile users, because to be perfectly transparent, people, you know, people have, like, I have my Apple, whatever. I don't know if I have Microsoft Word in it or not. If I went, you know, and I do this every day, if I go to LHI and I try to do something for, well, let's say I'm doing ID theft for my mom, an ID theft form, you know, to a credit report or something like that. I'm not going to be able to assemble if I don't have Microsoft Word or equivalent, right? So so how do you tell the user, hey, before you assemble, you have to have that? This is the tips on how you install. And where is the onus of responsibility, right? From an LHI perspective, I want to make sure that we have the tips and we have the help on the back end. Should somebody send, hey, I don't know how to create the document because I'm on a, if they give, tell us what type of cell phone is, maybe we can give them a can note. But should that also be put in every single instruction or every single printout by our local partners that create forms? I think yes, right? But we have to really understand where the pain points are. Like, so for me, rate of assembly of mobile end users, something we have to think from a system wide perspective, maybe warnings, maybe, hey, we see that you're on a mobile, without being intrusive, those kind of things, so that people know to save and then email or a tip, like what Montana Legal Services is doing in terms of giving tips to mobile users. But the other thing is also, um, letting people know ahead of time, though we don't want to bombard them because we know that giving them a lot of disclaimers and a lot of technical requirements turns regular people off, right? People don't want to read about what technology you need before you start a form. But there has to be ways to elegantly address this that go beyond system issues, that that are not platform dependent. They're depending on what you're using. So I think that this is something we should continue, all of us should continue to think about and talk about and share. If you come up with a really cool way and you see that it has an impact, let's share it so that other people can take that and emulate. I'm hearing a note here from Lisa, which I'm gonna read. Her program has published at least one blog item to promote broadband benefits. So that is great. Lisa, I don't know if you can put it on the chat. The blog, if you can find it. Just an idea of how to do outreach on this if your program has the capacity. Anyone else? Like, I think we had, I hope Marilyn, is Marilyn still with us? I was wondering if Marilyn had any insights. Oh, great, here it is. I'm gonna put this on there. So I'm gonna put I think I don't see Marilyn here anymore. I was wondering if she had any comments because she's in Kansas, and I know she has a lot of really good relationships and creates new relationships on the forum experience. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? I'm gonna post this on the side so you can look at it. If any one of you who's working with us on forums wants to like look at your data for your state, like I can give you this for your state so you can see what your curve look like. So you can see if you had this steep decline or not. Some of you had like zigzag up and down, or like whenever you released a new form, your use went up. Then you can also see at what happened to different type of NIMC codes. We use the numerical index that LSC requires people to use, so you can see your form type. Of course, family law was the highest and eviction became the second highest, then followed by consumer. Luckily, consumer went down because there were no credit card collections because the courts shut down those dockets. So a lot of consumer use in LHI went down correspondingly, but family law remained at around 84%, followed closely by housing, which, with the moratoriums, housing dropped, but it did pick up towards the end because some people were still filing evictions. Anybody else want to raise their hand, share, or comment? No? Okay. Well, be on the lookout for the announcements for the next code push, where we'll be pushing some of the changes I shared. Um, and thank you all for joining and tuning in today. If anybody is new to LHI or has been with LHI but has not been keeping up with the email functionality, the PDF functionality, Connect functionality, which were all ways to go and close the last mile, borrowing Lori's term, reach out to me and I would be happy to show you. If you already have the forms using these capacities, is a small development change, like a logic statement that you can insert, and then it will trigger the functionality in the system. So it's not a major revision and everything is coded to go. It's just a matter of working out the agreements between your form owner and the receiving court or the receiving agency, because it could be a school system. It doesn't have to be a court. It could be somebody that's going to review that document and make a decision. And if anybody wants to look at forms for evictions, because those are coming up, feel free to reach out too. Okay, we'll end. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Claudia.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.